Da Dang. Chapter 15. Jin Tang was sitting upright behind his wide rosewood desk, which was covered by all kinds of embroidery patterns. In front of him stood the steward eunuchs from various offices of the Weaving and Sewing Bureau, each holding their official documents and waiting for his commands. We shall not weave these 43 types of brocades, such as the purple brocade with embroideries of jewelers and zigzag patterns, and the purple brocade with embroideries of water droplets, fangsheng, and magpies. Jin Tang struck these names off the list in one go. The people living near the southern coast have seen too many of them, so they're not selling well in Guangzhou. /Note, fangsheng is a traditional Chinese decoration pattern meaning auspicious /. The eunuch in charge of weaving the brocades nodded continuously in agreement. Add additional 29 types of damask, like the damask embroidered with patterns of tides and ripples of water, and the one with white heron and water ripple embroideries. It's getting hotter by day, so they will be popular. And so the eunuch in charge of weaving the damask noted his task. Presently, the secretary of the meeting stepped forward and said, "Gong Gong, we have received yet another urgent order from the palace. All the various colors of silk, gauze, brocade with golden threads, glittering silk, brocade with python embroideries, robes with the fighting bull embroideries on the chest and back, the brocades with Fiyu, Kylin, the robes with lion embroideries on the sleeve, robes with embroideries at the knee level, the brocades with embroideries of flying immortals, and the brocades with embroideries of divine deers, that were stored in the palace have all been rewarded away by His Majesty. His Majesty had dispatched an urgent order to us, Suzhou and Hangzhou, to weave 3,000 to 5,000 p of various fabrics and to have them delivered to the capital as soon as possible. /Note, p is a length unit in ancient China. 1 p is roughly equal to 10 to 13 meters long /. They've ran out of fabrics again. Jin Tang scratched his head, feeling overwhelmed. Just then, a eunuch serving as his attending eunuch surged through the door and knelt down in front of the desk and reported, "Gong Gong, Qi Wan has left." Du Gong was there to see him off. That old antique has finally left. Jin Tang finally put a smile on his face and began to joke with his confidants, "Let's pray that he will never visit us on the return trip. We definitely can't afford to entertain him again." All the officials above the third rank, as well as those in military positions and those in charge of defending the city, have seen him off at the harbor. The eunuch added. Jin Tang nodded in response. So, the secretary of the meeting continued, "Gong Gong, it is now the time to reserve the looms to fulfill our yearly quota of weaving the dragon robes, the digi robes, the velvet brocade, and the formal belts. Lao Zuzong has also sent us an official letter to urge us." Jin Tang frowned. "Didn't they tell us last time that the plain silk needs to be embroidered with golden threads for the fabrics on the chest?" /Notes, 1. Dragon robes, also known as longbao, is the robes worn by the Emperor of China. 2. Digi is the garment being worn by the Empress and the Crown Princess / It's been changed again. The eunuch in charge of weaving the silk was troubled by this tricky situation, too. Last month's imperial decree ordered us to change the embroidery to the pattern of red cloud with tigers and leopards. The patterns and designs the royals preferred were constantly changing, yet there were only so many weavers and looms in Nanjing. With only 12 shishan in a day, how could they possibly take care of everyone's needs? Jin Tang was feeling anxious when the attending eunuch entered the room again, this time not kneeling in front of the desk but approached and directly whispered in Jin Tang's ear, "Manager Chu of the Ministry of War has left his office." Hearing that, Jin Tang immediately waved to the rest in waiting, "Go now. We'll resume the meeting tomorrow at noon." He then instructed the attending eunuch, "Quickly, send a sedan chair to fetch him." And so, the soft sedan chair of the Weaving and Sewing Bureau went on the road. It ran into Chu Feng's sedan chair on Tongjimen Avenue. With respectful salutations, the eunuchs accompanying the soft sedan chair presented Chu Feng an invitation card from Jin Tang. "Master Chu, Gong Gong Jin is inviting you to have a cup of tea as a gesture of gratitude." Chu Feng didn't even get out of his sedan chair as he replied coldly and distantly. There's no need, I should be the one thanking him. Our Gong Gong insists, as there's a personal item that he wishes to return to you in person. What personal item? It's just a handkerchief. Chu Feng was slightly annoyed. The eunuch continued, in consideration of Master Chu, our Gong Gong have sent a sedan chair with us, and will escort you back after dark. Chu Feng lifted the window of his sedan chair and peered outside, and indeed he saw a sedan chair. After pondering on it for a while, he ordered his servants to halt at a secluded spot by the roadside. Jin Tang's men were quick-witted, too. Seeing Chu Feng's servants in action, they immediately followed up, so that they could swiftly pick Chu Feng up as soon as he exited his own sedan chair. Once Chu Feng had settled comfortably in the new sedan chair, they lowered the curtain and departed. After sitting in the sedan chair for a while, Chu Feng began to regret his earlier decision. He hesitantly inquired by tapping on the wall of the sedan chair, "Your Gong Gong Jin?" The question was on his lips, yet he was unsure of how to phrase it, so he chewed on it for quite some time, and finally asked, "Does he often interact with government officials like this?" Well, that was a tricky question for the eunuch, and just as Chu Feng thought he wouldn't get an answer, the eunuch spoke up, "Not exactly. Our Gong Gong finds joy in reading and calligraphy, yet he never seeks close relationships with scholars easily." He paused, which made Chu Feng itchy to learn more, and he continued, "He had lectured us previously, that those bearing official titles and fame wouldn't bother to make acquaintances with us, unless there's something they want from us, which will be either a dirty or an ugly deal." This is insightful. Chu Feng couldn't help but agree with Jin Tang. At the moment, the eunuch outside the sedan chair added, "Unless." "Unless what?" Our Gong Gong said, "Unless the person we wish to make acquaintance with is a close confidant." A close confidant. Chu Feng wasn't sure how to weigh the meaning that the word carried. He felt a fleeting sense of happiness, and a simultaneous feeling of shock and dread, as if he was burning himself during his attempt to light a fire. As he assessed his gains and losses from this decision, they arrived at the weaving and sewing bureau. The soft sedan chair entered through a side gate. After walking north for about half a cow, they finally reached Jin Tang's office. /Note: Cow is a unit of time in ancient China. 1 cow equals to about 15 minutes. When he first got off the sedan chair, Chu Feng was struggling to hide his embarrassment and apprehension. All he wanted was to claim his handkerchief and leave. However, the moment he saw Jin Tang smiling and looking at him at the door, not even wearing a wangjin and only wearing casual clothing, he sensed a sudden relief and was at peace. The tea was by Ko Silver Needle. Jin Tang was behaving very relaxed, neither did he salute formally to Chu Feng, nor did he use any cliched small talk. He fetched the small handkerchief as soon as he approached Chu Feng, like he was an ordinary scholar with no official titles, who couldn't bother less about court etiquette. "I've washed it and perfumed it with my benzoin incense." There was no one around to serve them, so Jin Tang personally poured hot water from a silver teapot into Chu Feng's cup. "The scent is somewhat different from what you're using." "Oh." Chu Feng only gave him a simple response, lifted the cup to his lips and finished the tea. "Why would you?" Jin Tang was hesitant about asking. Yet, perhaps the atmosphere was genuinely pleasant, with the two of them sitting by the small window and sharing tea using Tuhao tea cups. As the boiling spring water flowed into the cups, he finally picked up the courage to ask, "Why did you end up in the Ministry of War?" "The Ministry of War and the Ministry of Rights have always been at odds." Chu Feng smiled but didn't answer. Jin Tang felt somewhat embarrassed, as if he was being too gracious towards someone who was indifferent to him. His thin lips tightened, appearing a bit sorrowful and pitiful. Last time, Chu Feng finally spoke but only uttered the simplest reply, "Thank you." This time, it was him pouring water for Jin Tang. "It doesn't matter whether I retrieve my handkerchief or not. I came here to ask this question, Why did the Weaving and Sewing Bureau cut down the dwarf pear trees? Many people had asked this question before, and Jintang always gave the same answer. But what should he say to Chu Feng? After some consideration, he eventually used the standard answer still. Our dugong has trouble sleeping well at night, so we have consulted someone for divination who told us that the pear tree forest is taboo. Chu Feng raised his eyebrows and stared at him, slowly turning the cup of tea round and round in his hand, his burning gaze imposing. Jintang didn't dare to meet his eyes. Not sure if it was out of nervousness or something else, he licked his lips and admitted vaguely, ever since we cut down the trees, our dugong indeed sleeps better. Silence. The kind of dead silence found only in the middle of night. All Jintang could hear was the silver teapot gurgling on the stove. A substantial period of time passed before Chu Feng finally replied, "Oh. That's another O from him." Chu Feng put down his cup and got up. Seeing that he was intending to leave, Jintang hastily said, "Stay a little longer." He then quickly tried to cover up his attempt to spend more time with him. "It's not yet dark outside. We can't let anyone see you leaving from my place." Chu Feng considered for a moment and agreed, but since he had already stood up, it felt awkward to sit back down again. So he strolled away and approached Jintang's desk, where he saw a small inkstone with flower carvings on the desk. It was hard to imagine that a eunuch with such power as Jintang would use such a crude item. He couldn't help but lean in for a closer look. Jintang stood up with him. As he saw Chu Feng studying the inkstone, Jintang felt embarrassed. "I bought it at Kiozai next to the Naza mansion when I was a child. I've been using it for years." He is a sentimental person, thought Chu Feng. However, what caught his interest were the other two words, the Naza mansion. It's for the consorts in the palace, in Beijing. It was nothing but an informal name that everyone used, but now that Chu Feng inquired about it, Jintang couldn't help but feel genuinely obscene, and his face turned glistening red as he struggled to speak. He tried to explain, his voice getting softer and softer, "where they select wet nurses for the consorts in the palace." By the way, it seemed like Chu Feng was trying to discreetly save Jintang from his embarrassment. He fished out a small, squarish box from his sleeves and gave it to Jintang. "I've just bought it recently. I didn't bring anything else suitable, so consider this my thank you gift to you." It was the finest Muslim product. Jintang recognized its high quality at a glance. It was a rouge for men. "How can I deserve?" He was trying to refuse the gift. However, Chu Feng could tell that he really wanted it. What Jintang desired was not that box of rouge, but in fact, it was a gift from a scholar. "Take it," Chu Feng insisted, stuffing the rouge into Jintang's hand, just as he had done with the handkerchief, his action betraying a hint of dominance. Jintang was so pampered that he was getting anxious as he scrambled to come up with some words to properly thank Chu Feng. At that moment, they heard a sudden commotion outside. If the sound could reach them in the office, then it must have been quite chaotic outside. "What's going on?" Jintang demanded angrily. The young eunuch on night duty replied outside the door, "Gong gong, the Ministry of War is arresting men for forced labor. They put up the notice this afternoon, stating that all families who had previously owned dwarf pear trees and had paid to the Weaving and Sewing Bureau are now recognized as part of the eunuch's faction. So they're being forced and trafficked to the north of the city, to build a dam there for 3 months. What?" Jintang was furious. He grabbed his yesa, put it on loosely around his shoulder and was ready to go out. Yet Chu Feng pulled him aside. "Don't go. It's chaotic out there. What are you people up to?" Jintang glared at Chu Feng, who hesitated for quite a while before finally admitting, "You know about the Yang Society, right? After last night's meeting, they announced that anyone who doesn't join their society will hence be known as those who took the eunuch's side. There will be no room for survival for fence-sitters from this day onwards." "What does that have to do with the common folks?" "Right, what does that have to do with the common folks?" Certainly Chu Feng understood that as well. It is a form of intimidation. They have to use someone to set an example and warn the rest. End chapter. Da Dang. Chapter 16. Xie Yule was carrying Liao Jixiang in his arms with extreme care, like he was holding a delicate golden Buddha statue. Liao Jixiang was also hugging him, remaining motionless and very obedient in Xie Yule's arms. They had known each other very well by now. Xie Yule leaped neatly from the big white boulder in the water and gently placed Liao Jixiang on the dry sandy soil on the other side of the creek. They then tidied their clothes and headed towards the deserted temple in the bamboo forest. So, Xie Yule picked up his unfinished sentence from a moment ago. Mei Azha pledged his loyalty to Lao Zuzong earlier than you did. Liao Jixiang stood shoulder to shoulder with him and nodded. Lao Zuzong has been in position for years, yet he only adopted 9 of us under his care, which is very rare. Judging from his words, Xie Yule could feel his respect and sentiment for the Lao Zuzong. It was the kind of reverence towards the elders in the family. Do you have fewer people under your name compared to him? Liao Jixiang suddenly looked up at him with a melancholic expression, and remained silent. Xie Yule was pained by that look. It was frequent for Liao Jixiang to become reticent all of a sudden, as if he was preoccupied by too many things on his mind. For an instant, Xie Yule wanted to hug him or simply wrap his arms loosely around him, so that he could gently comfort him and persuade him to let go of those troubles. Speaking of which, he changed the subject to something much lighter. What are your requirements when selecting subordinates? Smart, Liao Jixiang considered for a moment, and added impassively, and pretty. Xie Yule stared at him. Pretty. Selecting the castrated is just like picking kittens and puppies. Liao Jixiang looked back at him with a cold, distant, and even tragic expression. If you were me, would you not choose the beautiful ones? He used the word castrated to describe himself. It was clearly self-deprecating, yet Xie Yule felt a piercing pain in his heart. He opened his mouth a few times, but no words came out. Liao Jixiang suddenly laughed very deliberately and forcefully. Or someone like Yashiha, who was a Niako. /Note, Niako means trained in the palace. In the Ming dynasty, Niako referred to the eunuchs who wore armor and went through military training. Indeed, Xie Yule had never seen an ugly eunuch. From Zheng Xian to Jin Tang, from Aliu to Zhang Chai. Even for someone as old as Ji Wan, it was clear that he was once handsome and charismatic. It had never come across his mind before that eunuchs were merely the decorations in the Hall of Power, so how could they not be pleasing to the eye? Yashiha, it took Xie Yule considerable effort to restrain himself before speaking, is indeed skilled. He was a Luzhongzuwai. /Note, Luzhongzuwai means to escape from captivity and walk back to one's home country. Luzhongzuwai was an official term used to describe those who were captured by the Mongolian Tartars and managed to escape from the northwestern desert and come back to their hometown. Xie Yule was surprised, and just as he was about to ask for more details, a farmer rushed towards them. Behind him followed a group of fellow villagers, leading a 1 or 2-year-old gray-backed water buffalo. Xie Yule looked in the direction they came from, and noticed a village shop at the corner of the bamboo forest. They chanted a folk song and together, they laid the water buffalo down by the creek. One of them had a huge wooden hammer in his hand. They were ready to neuter the buffalo. Liao Jixiang immediately turned to Xie Yule, as if he wanted to throw himself into his arms, making him appear like a frightened bird. So, Xie Yule took the liberty to open his arms towards Liao Jixiang, trying his best to look sincere, ready to comfort him. However, all Liao Jixiang did was to stop in front of him. With his back to the buffalo, he trembled as he lowered his head. The buffalo seemed to comprehend its situation and let out a sorrowful howl. Xie Yule covered Liao Jixiang's head with his wide sleeve. Suddenly, there was a loud thud. The hammer had struck the buffalo's head. The villagers chattered intermittently, discussing where to drive the knife. At least they knocked it out, Liao Jixiang whispered, like he was suppressing something. Xia Yule heard him but didn't immediately understand. Some things took time to be comprehended. Like the long incense ashes accumulated on the burning incense stick falling down, or like the long icicles frozen since winter snapping abruptly in early spring. Suddenly, he was enlightened. Liao Jixiang was conscious then. When he experienced those miserable, agonizing torments, he was able to see and able to hear everything as he was wide awake. How could human even be so unbelievably brutal to one of his kind? Xia Yule felt the excruciating pain for Liao Jixiang for the first time, as if it was himself who was bearing all these intolerable occurrences and couldn't withstand anything anymore. The muscles on his face tensed up, his teeth clenched and clattered within his mouth. He heard Liao Jixiang choking as he whimpered, "Only livestock are treated this way." Xia Yule still didn't dare to embrace him, but his hands moved. His grasp on Liao Jixiang's arm was extremely rough and tight. Probably due to the pain, Liao Jixiang looked up at him, bitter tears streaming down his face. He said, "You see? You are human, whereas I am livestock." Liao Jixiang's arm was very skinny and his voice was hoarse. Xia Yule grabbed his hand all of a sudden. This time, their fingers entwined tightly, palms pressed against each other, and dashed towards the village shop in front of them. Rain came falling from the sky, so sudden and without any warning. It was a feather-like drizzle of spring, soft and gentle as they landed on them, which felt like a pair of hands made up of water or sand, disintegrating with their slightest movement. Liao Jixiang limped along, walking unsteadily but trying his best to keep up with Xia Yule. That business was still continuing behind their backs. It was just some light drizzles, which was nothing to hinder the villagers from driving the knife into the animal, nor did it prevent the young buffalo from losing its immature testicles. There seemed to be a temporary market today, as many people were gathered around the village shop. Xia Yule pulled Liao Jixiang under the eaves to shelter from the rain, and walked away alone to check out the creek. Such things were a common sight in spring, people neutering buffaloes, horses, and pigs, which would be done in a short while. Those farmers covered a worn bamboo mat on the back of the young buffalo, washed their hands in the creek and returned to the village in twos and threes. Xia Yule turned back. He saw Liao Jixiang standing under the eaves, slightly hunched with his face turned to the side, because farmers were staring at him, their gaze betraying traces of curiosity. They meant no harm, Xia Yule was aware of that, and he also understood their curiosity. At a glance, Liao Jixiang appeared too different from ordinary men. His proud demeanor made him fit the profile of an official, but an official wouldn't possess a touch of feminine grace such as his. His frail and slim figure was similar to that of a traditional opera singer, but one couldn't find the usual traces of cosmetics on his face. Then he must be a scholar, although scholars were usually not as cold or distant. Then he must be a eunuch. Xia Yule's heart was throbbing in pain again. He hastily walked towards Liao Jixiang. His gait was steady but his heart was racing. Liao Jixiang must have sensed his urgency too, as he was staring at him dazedly from under the thatched roof. Xia Yule didn't stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Instead, he approached from the front, embracing Liao Jixiang's figure little by little into his broad shield of shadow. In the greenish-gray shadows, Liao Jixiang seemed even slimmer and shorter. Xia Yule leaned in slightly, blocking the probing gazes from the villagers. "Just wait a bit. Wait another short while for the rain before we go," he said, his voice ever so gentle. Liao Jixiang studied his face for quite a while. "Why?" he asked timidly, as if he didn't know how to phrase his question. "Why are you so kind to me?" Xia Yule was taken aback. "Am I kind to him?" he asked himself. A mere simple gesture like this is considered kind. What he offered was nothing but a glance and a back to lean on. This person in front of him was in desperate need of warmth, as he was so pitifully cold. "I'm a eunuch," Liao Jixiang savored the momentary bliss under the protection of Xie Yulo's shadow, yet he was still trembling with apprehension, and half a cripple. Other than my 3,000 worries and lifelong loneliness, I... Shhh. Xie Yulu interrupted him, and tried to comfort him like he was comforting a child. Are you afraid of the rain? Liao Jixiang shook his head, so Xie Yulu laughed. I'm not afraid either. He suddenly grabbed Liao Jixiang's hand and held it firmly in his. Let's go, then. To worship the Buddha. And so they stepped into the rain together. Liao Jixiang glared at Xie Yulu for holding his hand tightly, and out of panic or some other emotions, he tried to withdraw his hand. However, Xie Yulu didn't allow it. Rather, he held Liao Jixiang's hand even tighter, like he was a pervert who didn't know better. The temple was just ahead of the village shop, less than a mile away. From across the creek, it looked like a grand Buddhist temple, but upon closer inspection, it was nothing but a deserted, unkept place. Shattered boulders and rocks were everywhere around the gate, which must have been the stone pagodas and tablets that the locals had smashed and utilized to enforce their own houses. What a sin! Liao Jixiang exclaimed, and Xie Yulu discreetly studied his face. The devotion in his gaze appeared genuine. He remembered the lavish offerings Liao Jixiang had made at the Jibo Buddhist temple, so he ingratiatingly asked, shall we enter and take a look? Liao Jixiang was shocked. He shook his head without a moment of hesitation. I can't make it. He was referring to the stones scattered everywhere on the ground, which were too demanding for his legs. Xie Yulu immediately squatted down halfway with his back towards Liao Jixiang, extending both of his arms backwards, indicating that he would carry him over. What are you doing? Liao Jixiang felt frightened for reasons unknown to him, and in his fear, there was also a hint of shy annoyance. Get up. Ignoring his words, Xie Yulu directly leaned closer to him and pulled him onto his back. Hurry up, if you don't want people to see. Perhaps Xie Yulu was very persuasive and Liao Jixiang was easily convinced, or perhaps due to his interest in this abandoned temple, Liao Jixiang unsteadily climbed onto Xie Yulu's back, onto that broad back and shoulders that were much wider than his own. This back belonged to a true man, steaming with vitality and warmth. Xie Yulu caught his legs in his hands and jolted Liao Jixiang lightly on his back. It truly feels like how it seems. He is as light as a feather. Liao Jixiang wasn't fond of being weighed like he was cargo, so he whispered in a gentle reproach, if you want to carry me, do it properly. Mumbling that, he settled down on his back, his arms wrapped tenderly and softly around Xie Yulu's neck. The fragrance of milk, sandalwood, and perhaps other indistinguishable scents came showering Xie Yulu, which made him feel extremely comfortable. He remained in a daze and was deprived of other senses even long after he put Liao Jixiang down in the half-collapsed temple. Afterwards, he watched Liao Jixiang kneel on the gravel ground covered in mud to recite sutras. After leaving the abandoned temple, Xie Yulu looked round and round, wanting to find somewhere else that they could visit. He didn't want to go back like this. Not just yet. His reluctance lingered and he didn't want to part with Liao Jixiang. However, Liao Jixiang remained standing still behind him. A long time passed before he finally called out to him, Chun Chu. Xie Yulu turned around, and saw him fidgeting and pursing his lips. He stammered, I need to relieve myself. Go ahead. Xie Yulu pointed him to a tall tree not far ahead. Yet Liao Jixiang turned around embarrassed and headed towards a clump of weeds. Xie Yulu found it odd and looked at him, but then he figured it was inappropriate to keep looking. Just as he was struggling between taking a look or not, he saw Liao Jixiang squatting down in the grass. Xie Yulu heard a sudden buzz in his head, like the sound of tearing up pieces of fine silk, and his mind went completely blank. He stared intensely at that patch of weeds, and seemed to observe Liao Jixiang wiping himself down there with something, then he tidied up his robe as he stood up. Eunuchs were castrated men. Xia Yulu had heard about it somewhere that there were two types of eunuchs, Quanbai and Banbai. The Banbai was partially castrated with only their testicles whereas the Quanbai. Xia Yulu's hand went to his chest, where he felt an agonizing pain like he was being pricked by countless needles. The pain was dense and sharp as he felt as if the world was spinning around him. Liao Jixiang approached him, his head lowered, holding a white silk handkerchief in his hand. He quickly dropped it on the ground as if he was afraid that Xia Yulu would see it. Xia Yulu tried his best to act natural, pretending to have not seen anything. He smiled and said, "Are you tired? I noticed an area ahead. I want to wash my hands." Liao Jixiang didn't look up. This sounded like a command, so Xia Yulu immediately headed towards the creek. The terrain was higher on this side of the bank, so the creek was hiding behind a small slope that Liao Jixiang couldn't climb down to. Xia Yulu went down for him. Seeing the foliage nearby, he plucked a random large leaf to scoop up some water, and carefully carried it in his hands and walked back. When Liao Jixiang saw him returning, he kept backing away, appearing to be afraid for some reason. Xia Yulu asked cautiously, "What's wrong?" Liao Jixiang didn't respond, but he refused to let Xia Yulu get closer. So Xia Yulu held out the leaf to him and said, "Water, for your hands." The water kept dripping from the leaf, and it wouldn't be long before it completely ran out, so Liao Jixiang had to come closer despite his reluctance, and scooped up the water with both of his hands. It was at this moment that Xia Yulu detected a faint smell of urine. All he did was cast a sympathetic look at Liao Jixiang, and all it took was just that one glance to shatter Liao Jixiang's hard-built defense. Panicking, he withdrew his hands in fear, but Xia Yulu's reaction was even faster, grabbing Liao Jixiang's hands immediately. That scoop of water was now completely spilled on the ground. The two pairs of hands, drenched through and through, were held tightly together. And those fingers, which were slippery from the water, slid smoothly against each other. Several times, Liao Jixiang tried to pull his hands away, but Xia Yulu wouldn't let go, and explained pretentiously, wash them clean." With a sudden jolt of the hand, Liao Jixiang finally managed to wrench free, and stared at Xia Yulu in shock and caution. Xia Yulu also felt himself to be unbearably indecent, so he tried to make up for it. "I just wanted to help you. I'm going back," Liao Jixiang said firmly. End chapter. Dadang. Chapter 17. Ruan Dian brazenly occupied the main seat in the hall of an official's household, while the actual owner stood below the dais and could only dare to be discreetly upset at Ruan Dian as he was not courageous enough to speak up. The owner's surname was Wen, an insignificant figure in the Yang society. Ruan Dian looked down at him condescendingly. "Aren't you all tough bones, you men of the Yang society?" He sneered. "Why are you already scared out of your wits?" The man remained silent, so Ruan Dian waved his hand to his men and said, "Kman, remind him of his involvement in hiding the fugitive." 3 or 4 so-called witnesses came forth one after another. Judging by their outfits, they were street vendors, yet they were in fact thugs hired by Ruan Dian. Their testimony all pointed towards the same thing, that they saw the fugitive, who committed 13 murders in a southern city last year, with their own eyes, and that he had entered Wen's house in the middle of the night, around the hour of yin yesterday. Obviously, Wen was harboring a criminal, so by law, he was deemed to be equally guilty of the murderer's crime. Note, hour of yin is 3 to 5 a.m. Hand over the fugitive. Ruan Dian pointed at him with no mercy. "If you can't produce him, you'll have to come with us." Official Wen couldn't be more familiar with the tricks of the eunuchs. "How much?" he inquired directly. "I don't have much in my pocket." 1,000 taels. Ruan Dian had a shameless grin on his face. "For such an appalling crime, any amount lower than this won't do you justice." Following that was a long period of bargaining. Clearly official Wen didn't want to deal with him any longer, so he asked straightforwardly, Let's both be honest. How much do you want? Ruan Dian saw that he understood the situation well, so his reply was decisive, 100 taels, in solid silver. Official Wen gestured to his family members and one of them immediately went to fetch the sum. Yet Ruan Dian suddenly shouted in rage. Wait. He stood up from the Taishi armchair. You all keep bragging about how eunuchs harm the people, but I think you scholars are the ones with evil hearts. To surrender 100 taels of silver without blinking. How many bones of the common folks have you chewed on? Official Wen glared at him, but Ruan Dian only sneered back, 100 taels is too little to ask. Buy me another 100 horses by the end of this month. The silver quickly changed hands. In large strides, Ruan Dian stepped out of the Wen's house. He took a few taels and distributed them to his men the moment he exited the gate. Just as he was about to tuck the rest of the silver in his chest pocket, Aliu stopped him, extending his hand towards Ruan Dian and showing off his big sparkling eyes. Why do you need money? Ruan Dian didn't pay much attention. Aliu never asked him for money before, but this time he insisted, clinging onto him. What's the matter with you, kid? He nagged like an older brother, and then he suddenly understood, you want to give it to Guo Xiaozhou. Aliu blushed and sniffed embarrassedly. Ruan Dian's expression became distorted. Of all the things that you could have learned from me, what you learned is how to keep a mistress. He looked extremely distressed. Have you seen what I've become after being with that bitch? Aliu couldn't care less about what he said and insisted by stretching out his hand. Ruan Dian tried to persuade him earnestly, wake up from your daydream. You think you can afford him. Yet as he spoke, he took out the silver. For someone like him, how would he be willing to be with you? He removed 50 taels from the pouch and weighed them in his hand. This pitiful amount is not even enough to touch his hand. After a brief moment of consideration, he handed Aliu the entire pouch once and for all. You fool. Aliu took the money and smiled adorably at him. Seeing how his face lit up, Ruan Dian felt both happy and concerned. He fiercely rubbed Aliu's little cat-like face as he said, all right, all right. Since this money is from corrupt officials, we shall spend it whatever way we want. As they walked, Ruan Dian cursed with hatred, these hounds of Yang society. They claim to fight against the eunuchs, but they don't dare to confront us. Damn them, they only know how to torment the common folks. He turned around after finishing his sentence, only to see a bustling street behind him. Aliu had long disappeared. He smiled helplessly, heartless little one. Aliu was leaning against a large mulberry tree. It appeared like he had something in his chest pocket, as it was puffed up. He grabbed a handful of small stones in his left hand and flew them one by one towards the windowsill of the second floor across the street. He had lost count of how many stones he had tossed before the window suddenly opened. A tender and delicate face appeared behind it. Aliu immediately stood upright and looked at him foolishly. Are you done yet? Guo Xiaozhou looked down from the upper floor, his sharp glare felt like raining knives. You're causing trouble every day and don't give me any money. You think you can walk away like that? Although Guo Xiaozhou spoke provocatively, Aliu wasn't angry at all. With a huge grin on his face, he fished out a hot paper package from his pocket. It's the pastries and crispy biscuits from the Xiaolin's family shop. Guo Xiaozhou's face softened a little as he spotted the package. He called his servant and shouted loudly, so that Aliu could hear, Xiao Huan, go and bring it up. The moment Aliu heard this, he dropped the paper package on the ground and trampled on it, crushing the biscuits to pieces. Guo Xiaozhou watched from upstairs, and he was furious. You little mute, don't mess with me. He stomped and stormed downstairs as he spoke, and violently pushed Aliu twice. Aliu was more than willing to be pushed. Very happily, he tightened his lips to hide his smile. Guo Xiaozhou should have just woken up, as he had not combed his hair, nor did he have any makeup on. His lustrous long, black hair hung loosely down to his waist, and his robe was fresh and clean, exuding a childlike innocence. Alio studied Guo Xiaozhou eagerly, as if his gaze was penetrative, which made Guo Xiaozhou felt so uneasy that he glared at him, cursing him, "You little bastard." Only then did Alio untie the pouch of silver taels from his waist and show it to Guo Xiaozhou. "Where did you get this from?" Guo Xiaozhou stopped pushing him. "Did you steal it? Or extorted it?" Alio tried to grab his hand, but Guo Xiaozhou immediately shoved him away. "What?" He was very condescending. "You want to touch my hand with this puny amount of silver?" Alio's hand didn't meet Guo Xiaozhou's in midair, so he awkwardly brushed his empty palm on the side of his robe. Looking at his shabby appearance, Guo Xiaozhou sneered arrogantly. "Every time you come here, you bring me either flowers or leaves. And when you finally bring some silver with you, you act like it's precious when it's nothing but a few dozen taels." Alio lowered his head. Guo Xiaozhou crossed his arms on the chest and asked, "Speak up. What do you want?" Alio didn't lie to him and pointed to a nearby alley. As Guo Xiaozhou's eyes followed Alio's hand, he became appalled. "Oh my god! You little eunuch have a filthy mind." Alio blushed shyly and clasped both of his hands into fists, only stretching out his two thumbs. He positioned the tips of the thumbs towards each other, and was just barely joining the two thumbs when Guo Xiaozhou appeared as if he was experiencing tremendous insults. He pulled Alio's sleeve and forced him into the alley, mumbling, "Let's go, you want a kiss, eh? You'll have to do it today." The passers-by on both sides of the street were watching. Although Alio was taller than Guo Xiaozhou by half a head, he was dragged into the alley like a young girl. The alley was dark, so dark that Alio couldn't see Guo Xiaozhou's face clearly. Yet all he felt was the warm, almost burning sensation of the person grabbing him. His hot breath was sprayed across Alio's face again and again, saying, "Where do you want to kiss? Go ahead." Guo Xiaozhou leaned in close and whispered softly and dangerously in his ear, "If you dare to kiss me, I'll have Zhang Xian cut off your head." It was Guo Xiaozhou's expectation that Alio wouldn't dare, believing that he was exactly like those opportunistic patrons who were adept at assessing the situation. Yet he didn't expect Alio to suddenly hug him extremely tightly. His hug came so eagerly and fiercely, that the pouch of silver taels dropped to the ground with a clatter, spilling the contents all over the place. "Hey, what are you doing?" Guo Xiaozhou struggled but couldn't wrench free. Only then did he realize that the little eunuch was very strong, even stronger than those rich and powerful men. He thought Alio would take advantage of the situation to touch him and harass him, but he didn't. All he did was to hug him tightly in his arms. After remaining in his embrace for a while, even Guo Xiaozhou softened up. He pretended to be displeased but acted coquettishly, "Hey, what are you doing?" *******. When Yishiha entered the chamber, Mei Azha was in front of the altar and worshipping the statue of Guanyin. He took a sideways glance at Yishiha, stood up from the praying mat and casually greeted him, "You're here." Yishiha appeared casual as well. He nodded his head and kneeled down on the praying mat, which was still warm, and muttered a Buddhism prayer in the Jurchen language. The altar was built for a statue of the Black Guanyin, which was dressed in a black robe, holding a black bottle in her hand, and had a silver aura behind her. This type of statue was a popular choice of worship among the eunuchs in Jiangnan. "I've discussed it with Chi-Wan." Mei Azha picked up his teacup with his prayer beads wrapped around his hand. He rested his back against the table. Justing waiting for his response, he said. Yishiha was silent, as if he was still ambivalent about his choices. Mei Azha considered for a moment, "You're aiming high, but have you ever thought of Zhang Chai?" Yishiha lowered his head and mumbled, "Jintang doesn't like me anyway." Mei Azha's stare at him was intent, which reminded Yishiha of an elder who had been through numerous vicissitudes of life, or a person burdened with grievances that he couldn't bring himself to disclose. "Young man, you will surely regret this. As a Jurchen, what else can I do?" Yeshiha stood up from the praying mat and adjusted the wrinkles on his yesa. Either I climb up, or remain mediocre and be stepped on by the others. It would be unfair to claim that Me'azah didn't understand him. Rather, he may have understood Yeshiha much too well. Don't be always fixated on your identity as a Jurchen. You are a human being first of all. So long as we are humans, we all inevitably have desires and emotions. There are no exceptions, even for us, eunuchs. Presently, someone outside knocked on the door. Gong gong. It was Me'azah's servant calling. There's a woman looking for Yeshiha, waiting at the back door in the west. Me'azah's hand, which was counting the prayer beads, stopped and directed his gaze towards Yeshiha. Yeshiha avoided his gaze nervously like he was guilty of something, and left the chamber after irritably pushing the door open. He hastened and arrived at the back door facing west. Indeed, there was a woman standing outside. She had a tall stature and a face in the shape of a melon seed. She wore her hair in an exquisite style that befit a royal maid and was dressed in the finest palace robe, the same girl Yeshiha and Siayulo saved in the Kinhua River. When she saw Yeshiha, her eyes lit up, but Yeshiha only replied ruthlessly, "Didn't I tell you not to come again?" The radiance in her expression instantly dimmed. Her body tensed up as she invested all her strength in maintaining her composure. She was clearly used to acting arrogant in her daily life. "I am a registered maid of the Kaiping Wang mansion," even her voice was trembling in her effort. "For you, it's not an unfair match. It has nothing to do about fairness." Yeshiha didn't even bother to spare her a proper glance. "I have someone else in my heart." She wasn't convinced. "You're just," the words were on the tip of her tongue, but with the two gatekeeping eunuchs nearby, she altered the words. "Don't find faults in me only. You're also nothing but a rootless servant." Yeshiha glared at her with abhor. "I should have left you to drown that day." He possessed such a cold heart of stone. Upon uttering those harsh words, he didn't even bother to look at her pale expression. He flicked his sleeves and was about to leave. Just as he turned around, he noticed someone with phoenix eyes and an oval face standing several steps away. It was Zhang Chai. Zhang Chai looked at him and then at the woman standing outside the gate. He asked, "Who is she?" Yeshiha was silent for a moment. The woman, unaware of their relationship, interjected in a fit of pique, "I am his woman. My bite marks are on his hand." Zhang Chai's face immediately turned solemn, which was followed by a fierce expression of someone eager to spill blood. He growled at the gatekeepers, closed the gate, and paced back and forth anxiously. "If anyone ever spots this woman again, whoever dares to open the door and take her message, I will flay his skin." The door was shut right away, but the intense pounding on the door followed immediately. Amidst the noisy clamor, Yeshiha approached Zhang Chai and softly explained, "She came to me on her own. I didn't return her feelings." Zhang Chai forced himself to not look at him, but perhaps he placed himself too low in front of Yeshiha, so he couldn't resist to steal a look. He was fully planning to glare fiercely at him even if it meant he had to pretend. However, when he lifted his eyes, the supposedly fierce glare transformed into a gaze full of sorrow and agony, which shattered Yeshiha's heart. "Let's go." Yeshiha reached for Zhang Chai's hand, "and change our clothes. We had a deal, remember? Every year on the 30th day of April, we shall wear red and ride horses shoulder to shoulder through the stone city gate." Zhang Chai didn't move. "You're getting bad influences from Ruan Dian and the rest." Keeping mistresses outside, as he spoke, he wiped his eyes with his sleeves, ashamed of his tears. "Come," Yeshiha held him in his embrace, like a big brother or a lover, and gently coaxed him, "Get your spare change ready. If those beggars outside the city gate didn't get to meet you, they would probably starve." At the end of the day, Zhang Chai couldn't resist him for long, so he obediently turned around. As he did so, he stole a glance at Yeshiha's left hand, and there was indeed a faint bite mark between his thumb and index finger. End chapter.